Welcome to a study of Paul's letter to the Romans, Lesson 1, where we will study the use of letters in the Roman Empire of the first century and Paul's creative modification of that letter form. One of the major forms of communication between people in the Roman Empire at the time of Paul's active life was the letter. This carried on in the Western literary tradition into the 18th century, where the first novels were all letter form, where the plot was shown in letters exchanged between people. It's amazing how long a literary tradition will remain in a culture. There were no newspapers, publishing companies, or professional journals available for the people to communicate. Governmental communications were handled by the military using the magnificent military highway system. In fact, that was the reason that Rome went into building such a highway system, was to make sure military communication would not be interrupted by weather. Letters at that time were of two kinds, personal and public. The only difference between the two was the intended readership. The personal letter was addressed to an individual, or at most a small group of individuals. The public letter was addressed to some wider segment of society. Now, I want to use Paul's letter to the Romans as an illustration of the literary form of a letter. First of all, in all letters is the salutation. If you have your New Testament there, you will look chapter 1:1 through 1:7. You will find the salutation. The first word in a Roman letter was the name of the person writing it. I'm sure you've had the experience of receiving a letter in an unknown handwriting and having to look at the last page of the letter to determine who it's from. People in New Testament times didn't have that problem at all. The first word in any letter, whether it was public, private, whether it was long or short. In fact, in the 60 years that I've alluded to of study of the New Testament letter form, it's been discovered that no matter how simple a letter was, it could be as simple as a homesick private in Egypt writing to his mother to send him some special food because this army food was just getting him down. It would be in exactly the same form that I'm talking about here. Or it could be Paul writing, as he does in Romans, a treatise concerning an organized look at his gospel and the way it fit together. And that, I remember how surprising that was to me. You could see the form carry through in all of these letters. The personal letter was addressed to an individual, as I said, or a small group of friends. The public letter was addressed to some wider segment of society. The writer used this section to introduce himself and the content of the letter. The writer went into greater or lesser detail, depending on their previous history with the recipient or recipients. The second element of the name and was the name and identification of the readers. Here, the writer might use rhetorical devices to influence his appeal to the readers. The third element of the salutation is a prayer of gratitude or of blessing. Given the Greek word Eucharisto, which means I give thanks, or the Greek word, or the word Benedicto, which means I say good things about you, it's called the Eucharisto or the Benedicto, according to what it is. But no matter how long the letter or how short, it contained all of these elements. The body of the letter. Now in Romans, the body of the letter runs from Romans 1:8 to 15:33. The body of the letter starts with another prayer for the recipient of the recipients. There's one thing about it, if you got a letter from someone in the first century Roman Empire, you had been well prayed for. Even if you were one atheist writing to another, it shows the all-pervasive influence of the degraded Roman religious system. They gave lip service to it, but it did not influence their moral or ethical behavior. Epistles were thought, as I said 60 years ago, to be a careful literary production by which the intelligentsia communicated with their peers. Letters were by the common people and did not attract much attention from scholars. However, 60 years of discovery and analysis have disclosed that no such difference in form exists. All first century letters have the same form, and all the letters in the New Testament have the same form, whether Paul wrote them, whether Peter wrote them, whether James wrote them, whether John wrote them. All of them have the same form. Even in that strange last book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation, it has the same form. It's spread out over the whole 20 chapters, but it has the same form that the other letters do. I don't know about you, but I find that a very interesting thing. If you understand the pattern, the form of a New Testament letter, it will make 2/3 of the New Testament much easier for you to understand and apply to your life. The difference between the two forms were not discovered until the very end of the letter. You have to wait to the end to decide what kind of a letter it was. And the third section of the body is personal greetings. Now, a couple of years ago, not quite that long, but close that long, it was my privilege to listen to a lecture by N.T. Wright, who is professor of New Testament and New Testament exegesis and early Christian history, St. Andrew's College in Edinburgh, in which he maintained that the Apostle Paul invented biblical theology. And I think he made a good point. I would like to add something that I haven't seen anyone else mention. I would not dare claim that I was the only one who ever noticed it, though. I would also like to claim for Paul the creation of the mixed public-private letter. I think it's interesting that by simply adding a section on greetings at the end of his letters, Paul addressed and made his letters both personal and general, both personal and public. That is, he combined the two so that, and this tells us something, a great deal of something about the New Testament church. It was a public-private or a private-public institution. It existed in time and space. It existed in a certain place under certain socio-economic circumstances. But at the heart of it, it was a spiritual, multicultural, multiracial fellowship. I think that the church sometimes today loses that view of its nature. Any time that people try to exclude groups from fellowship in the church on the basis of culture or on the basis of race, they have missed the point. For Jesus told his apostles to go into all the world and teach them everything I have taught you. Now, this is a rather quick introduction to the letter form, but it will enable you to study on your own and see how this fits as we proceed in the study of Paul's letter to the Romans. Thank you.